Welcome back to the Bright Show podcast, boxing. So Oleksandr Usyk has been ordered to fight Agit Kabayel by the WBC, and I got super excited about this news. However, there's one major issue with this announcement. So I'm going to flip my screen, and as you can see there, it says that Oleksandr Usyk handed world title ultimatum by WBC after request granted. So Usyk requested for this world title opportunity. Now, I wanted to find some quotes from Mauricio Suleiman, and I was able to find one. So I'm going to scroll down here, and it says that, look, I'm going to highlight it right here. It says that Kabayel was not available because he had a fight scheduled in January. This is what Mauricio Suleiman told Chris Mannix. Of course, we saw that Agit Kabayel fought Damian Kniba in a fight which he won by stoppage in the third round, and I thought that Kabayel was a bit more rusty in that fight. So it's good that he got his fight out of the way. And then it says that so Usyk requested a voluntary title defense, which is very customary. So as you see here as well, he was given that opportunity, and he must fight the interim champion next after the ruling. So this is what the WBC, have ruled. Now, as I said, I got excited about this news because I think the only thing that makes sense, the only fight that makes sense for Oleksandr Usyk is fighting Agit Kabayel, because all the rumors we've been hearing about Usyk fighting this person or that person, I don't think makes any sense. The only, fight that makes sense and the boxing public want to see and would love to see is Agit Kabayel versus Oleksandr Usyk. And, I feel like that fight will sell out a stadium in Germany, because we saw Agit Kabayel versus Damian Kniba. Kabayel put a lot of people in the stadium, right? I think about 16,000 people in that arena. So Kabayel can do 30, 40,000 with Oleksandr Usyk. So that fight makes sense. But I was disappointed to hear that it's not going to happen next, because they've given Usyk the opportunity to fight a voluntary, right, after his mandatory, which is Agit Kabayel. And I'm not sure whether the WBC is serious about this, because for all we know, the WBC could be saving face. They could be giving Usyk the opportunity to do whatever he wants, because we've seen this so many times. The WBC are notoriously known for giving their fighters leeway and, preferential treatment to do things that they shouldn't do. And I just have a feeling that this news means nothing, because Usyk might decide not to fight Kabayel, and the WBC are not going to do anything about it. And also, I thought that this was this had to take immediate effect. So Usyk was ordered to fight Kabayel, but no, Usyk can take a fight before fighting Kabayel. Look, guys, I think we need to have an open and honest conversation about Oleksandr Usyk and his lack of decision making about who he's going to fight next, and how that is probably a major issue, a problem for the heavyweight division. And we're going to talk about that in a separate video. But this video is about this news that Usyk has been ordered to fight Kabayel. And when you read into the article, you can see that this decision, or this, mandatory challenge that Usyk has to do, because Kabayel is the interim champion for the WBC, is after Usyk fights a voluntary challenger. And who is this voluntary challenger? We don't know. So it's really interesting to see that that is the ruling of the WBC. But look, as I said, there's no other fight that makes any sense than Usyk versus Kabayel. Usyk versus Deontay Wilder did not make much sense, and I think a lot of people, on this channel put a lot of comments in the section and said that it didn't make sense. I've heard a lot of people talk about it, on interviews, on other radio stations, like it doesn't make sense, right? Usyk versus Kabayel is the only fight that makes sense, and I think it's the only fight that will put a lot of people in the stadium in Germany. Just imagine it. Kabayel has established himself as a German fighter, as a good heavyweight. He's put, as I said, 1,000 people in an arena. They can do that in a stadium in Germany. Usyk is a massive star around the world. So, the thought of Usyk wanting to fight anybody else apart from a top fighter like Kabayel doesn't make sense to me. Do you see what I'm saying, guys? It doesn't make sense. I want you guys to get in the comment section and let me know what you think about Usyk being ordered to fight Kabayel as a mandatory challenger. Do you think it's going to happen? Do you think that the WBC is just doing one of those things where they say that this champion is going to do this, but then they do the opposite of what they should do, which in this case, Usyk can end up not fighting Agit Kabayel at all. And for me, that is the fight that makes the most sense for Usyk and Kabayel and for the heavyweight division, if you think about it. Because if Usyk fights Kabayel, the interim title, which Kabayel has, becomes vacant and somebody else can fight for it. So I feel like, the conversation of whether Usyk is holding up the division needs to be had, and we're going to talk about it in a separate video. But what do you think about this? Do you think that we actually see Usyk fight Kabayel? Or is this just the WBC and Oleksandr Usyk saving face? Get in the comment section and let me know what you think about it.